Hey everyone, Joey. um, well, the curriculum I selected was Everyday Mathematics, and kind of the backstory. The reason I did is the district I used to work at and came from. We had um, standards we were to follow, but we were always able to use our own resources, select our own lessons, and create them. And the year after I left, they adopted the Everyday Math to implement it district wide. And so I was interested to see some research on it and see how good it really was. But also, my old math coach and director from the district kind of said some of the teachers were having a hard time because they did have the option of using it somewhat as a resource and they were struggling with that. So I kind of wanted to look more at why. Um, the criteria I use for evaluation is I really use those three domains. What is it pretty much to the teachers, for the students, and then the actual curriculum and the domain specific mathematics stuff that it presents. So basically, with the material, the actual mathematical content domain, it does a good job. I aligned it. It's aligned to the NCTM standards, mathematical standards, and so they have a clear scope of how it aligns and a progression from grade to grade and year to year and week to week how it meets those different things. So that was aligned nicely, um, and they present problems in different ways. They have a huge emphasis on spiral review, so they're always retouching them, which is okay. Um, so I give it a good evaluation as far as the domain part. Now the student part, okay, because they do. I think one of the things, it was a positive and a negative. I like that they had the at the beginning of each chapter like a connection to real life where they show maps and say how it's all this. But then when you get into the actual work problem, it's very little like creative and constructivist type questions about all that. It's more like, okay, using maps, how far from here to here or whatever. So it was more like just applying skills to the topics of a content rather than actually digging into the context, like the mapping stuff, to actually figure stuff out. So I don't know. It's almost like they did it just to say we had that part. But the students have a resource book, a guidebook. The main thing is there's what they call the student journal, which I thought was an inappropriate term. Is really just a book of worksheets, and they go page by page that correspond with the student resource. Um, I don't know, a lot of just student work really. And then finally with the teacher domain, I think this is one of the most interesting things is it gives the teacher manual, it helps them follow it, but it's a very, very structured program and you have to follow it really how it says or it doesn't really go together well. And so that was one of the recommendations I'll talk about later. But it does support questions that the teachers can ask. Is pretty clear as far as what it wants the teacher to say, use, pass out to students, and those types of things. So it was okay with that. Other research on it, most of the research I found was about its effectiveness as what they call reform based curriculum, which is, this, as we have seen, even after a nation at risk, this big push for curriculums that are directly tied to some of these NCTM, Common Core standards. And, most of these reports show that schools using the reform-based everyday math are outperforming students who are not using these reform-based types of curriculums. Um, that was, I mean, it supported that this, it supported everyday math as far as a good instructional tool for students. But finally, I know it has to be under 5 minutes. My recommendation was, I thought, two specifically. The first is that some districts get curriculums like Everyday Math not to use with fidelity, but to use as a resource. And currently, it's very hard to use the Everyday Math like that because the way it's structured with the spiral review. So a teacher wanted to use this as a resource for some lessons and others. It becomes almost impossible to wade through the spiral review parts and everything. So if they had a separate like teacher guide that said, okay, if you're just using this as a resource, here's like the lessons and the activities you should go and flip to these things. I think that would really help. And then also, I think for the students, And really, their idea with a student journal is okay, but they really should make it a student journal where they can have creative thoughts and make all kinds of um, unique connections to the mathematics and write and things like that, rather than just worksheet after worksheet. So that was mine, and hope you guys liked it. Only 520. Okay.